Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
And today we're talking about The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Released in 2002, directed by Peter Jackson, written by Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, Stephen Sinclair, and Peter Jackson. Obviously based on the novel by J.R.R. Tolkien. And Tolkien,
I think is.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's all. Is it Tolkien?
I don't know. I've always pronounced it Tolkien.
Really?
Yeah. Right? Tolkien?
Yeah. That's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I said really. Yes, that's what I say. Really?
Really?
You say it that
That's how
way?
you say
The
it?
way I say it?
Starring, this is cast list I just realized is a little out of order. So starring Elijah Wood, Ian McKellen, Orlando Bloom, Viggo Mortensen, Sean Astin. It's got like a lot of like random characters in the beginning on IMDb here. Christopher Lee. I should have looked at this earlier. Dominic Monaghan. Miranda Otto is in this. John Rhys Davies, of course. Andy Serkis.
Did you say Ian McKellen?
I did say Ian McKellen. He was the second one I said.
Oh, okay.
Carl Urban is in this. Hugo Weaving.
Yes. So what's interesting about Carl Urban is, you know that scene where, like, you see him way beforehand, but I wrote this in my notes, and I want to just go. I'll go ahead and say it. And it was the scene where Gandalf shows up in the distance, and who is it that sees him? Is it Aragorn? I think.
All right.
Yeah, it is.
It's
Aragorn.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I was just going to say, full disclosure, we were supposed to record this episode a while ago, and so I watched this movie like a month ago. So I may not be the best at remembering certain scenes.
Fair enough. I will try to be, but then again, we were discussing my memory patterns lately, and we'll see how I do. But
Okay.
I just watched the movie today and yesterday. But yeah, there's a scene where it's towards the end of the movie. It's during the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Right. Oh, yes.
And
so, yeah, it would be Gandalf and with all the people that Gandalf
and Gandalf shows, and like Aragorn sees him, he's like, it's the first time he had seen him because he thought he was dead, and he was like, oh, it's Gandalf. And then I can't remember his character's name.
Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas see Gandalf in the forest. You know,
that's right.
They're like the first ones that see Gandalf when he comes back.
God, can we restart this podcast? I'm just kidding.
It's fine.
Yeah, you're right. Anyway, but they were separated for the rest of the movie. Anyway, like up until that point.
Yes.
But Carl Urban comes up and like rides up, and that was the moment when he did that. I was like, that's Carl Urban. Like I forgot that was him. And I'll also mention, I have seen Fellowship of the Ring like probably 20 times. I've seen Two Towers maybe like 5 times.
Yeah, we're probably in a similar boat there because I think I've seen I've probably seen Return of the King even less than that.
Yeah, no, I'm probably the same.
Fellowship and maybe that's part of the reason why I consider Fellowship to be my favorite, and it's just because I always tell myself I'm going to have a Lord of the Rings marathon and only end up watching the first one. Right. I don't know, but I actually have,
and that's and from I can't speak for you, but for me, like that's the same thing, and it's not. I don't stop watching it because they're not good movies, but
who has the time, right? that's the main.
Especially after watching like this, I did not remember that the extended version of Two Towers is 4 hours long.
Yeah. I think each one is 4 hours, and then the Return of the King is.
I thought they were
like 4.5 hours. No, the theatrical version of each movie is. Well, the theatrical version of Fellowship and Two Towers are 3 hours each.
Are they?
And then Return of the King is over 3 hours. It might be 3.5 hours or 3 hours and 20 or something.
I didn't realize they were that long, like standard.
So so I was going to tell you the story of when I saw it the first time, right? So when I saw Fellowship of the Ring in theaters for the first time, and I probably told this story on the Fellowship episode, but I went and saw the midnight showing of it and I had to be at work the next day at 6 a.m., which was real just great decision making on my part as a young man. But anyway, I went and saw the midnight showing of Fellowship, and it felt really long. And I mean, because it didn't get out until after 3 a.m. And when it came out on DVD, I watched it with my brother at home, like in the evening, and it didn't feel nearly as long. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So then when I went and saw Two Towers, that I did not see the midnight showing. I learned my lesson there, but it felt incredibly long. And so my brother liked Fellowship, and he wanted to go see Two Towers. And my thought process was, well, Fellowship was really long the first time I saw it, but wasn't as long the second time, maybe because I knew it was going to, how long we had to go and all that. So I was like, so Two Towers shouldn't feel as long the second time around. So I went and saw it in the theater with my brother, and it felt so long. And so I think for a long time, I used to think Two Towers was kind of like, was maybe my least favorite out of the three, which I realize is, Two Towers, I think, is a lot of people's favorite.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Because of the Battle of Helm's
I think
Deep?
we made mostly because of the Battle of Helm's Deep, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I that's just kind of the impression I get from people, that I've seen online and stuff like that. But I could be wrong. Maybe Return.
I'm on board with you, actually. I still feel that way. That Two Towers. Well, I don't know. I need to watch
Return
of the King
yeah.
again. But I will go ahead and say that. So here's the deal. Fellowship is going to be 20 years old next year.
This year.
Excuse me. Yes, this year, because it's 2021. Yeah, you're right. And surprise, it's 2021. This year. So. And I was trying to think of, I was like, I'll think about it later, and I didn't. So I'll try to think about it now. But I was trying to think of when this movie came out, what was 20 years old? Like, would have been 1980. So, like, when this movie came out,
it would have been 1981, I guess, technically.
Empire
Strikes Back.
I was going to say Empire Strikes Back would have been like 20 years old. And to think about when you saw this movie, to think about how old Empire Strikes Back was.
Right.
And to realize that much time has gone by now when you just watched the movie for this podcast, it's just mind-blowing. On top of that, I also was like, I feel like there were scenes in this where I was watching, and there were battle scenes where you didn't really have the battle scenes. So Fellowship of the Ring was very story driven, and it was visually driven, but not in a battle sense.
Right.
Two Towers is very battle heavy, and that was one of the things that got a lot of attention for the movie was battle sequences that people had never seen done before with CGI and fantasy creatures and all this stuff. I am going to say I'm going to say battle choreography in film and television has evolved a lot.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see that, actually. I was kind of like watching some of the battles, and I was like, this feels very simple almost. And it was interesting because when Lord of the Rings came out, it was leading, the way for it.
Right.
And it was like, it was groundbreaking.
Yeah, and I think it's still entertaining, but it does.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's especially. I mean, it like was the stepping stone kind of almost for these huge battle sequences that we've seen now, not just in movies but on TV, like Game of Thrones and stuff like that. So.
Right. Yeah, because the last battle sequence I remember seeing that got my attention enough to where I was like, that just changed. Like, that just raised the bar, was Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And going back and seeing this and thinking, because it was funny because I thought about that Game of Thrones sequence, the battle sequence, is the Battle of the Bastards.
Mm-hmm.
Was the battle sequence that I was thinking of. And
that's the one that came to mind when I was just thinking of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was a cinematography masterpiece. But I'm curious, I mean, that's like a 3-year-old scene now.
Yeah, I know, right?
I wonder if going back and watching it now would be like, huh.
Maybe not right now because, like you said, it's only 3 years old. But maybe 20 years from now, I wonder if it'll.
I'm sure. But there were also, I don't know if you noticed, like some of the sound editing and stuff, and the sound effects that they chose to use. There were some like ones that threw me off.
I didn't pick up on that, but I'd be curious to hear what.
Yeah, there were a couple like yells. Like there was like this one guy that like got flung, and like the yell that they chose for the guy was like almost cartoonish, and it was just I was like, wow.
That might have been the Wilhelm scream. Have you ever heard about the Wilhelm scream? It's kind of, yeah. There's
it
like
has to be.
There's like
Did they put it in the movie intentionally?
Yeah, probably. There's a scream. I can't remember what movie it like originated from, but it's a long time ago, like the 20s or 30s or something.
I have heard about it, and I don't know what it sounds like, but
it's kind of cartoony-ish. It's like a high. It's like a. I can't. I'm gonna attempt to do it, and if it sucks, I'm gonna cut it out. But it's like a. Kind of like type of scream.
That was it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This movie, I guess, technically is 19 years old because it came out in 2002, but 20 years.
Well, technically, Fellowship they came out around Christmas, so it still has like a little bit less than a year to go. But
this episode will go up in April, I think. So it'll be, but yeah, it'll because they were all released in December of 2001, December of 2002, December of 2003. So yeah, it's got a little bit to go, but 20 years, you were saying that like Empire Strikes Back was 20 years old in 2000, which was something I hadn't even really thought about. But it's a testament to kind of how time just our perception of time kind of speeds up as we get older. Because Lord of the Rings does not feel like, I mean, it feels like it was a while ago, but it doesn't feel like it was as long ago.
Right. Because when we saw Lord of the Rings for the first time, that time period was before we were born.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And now that time has passed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like we've lived over 2 lifetimes in that time period.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
What's really crazy is that we're only 2 years away from
not over 2 lifetimes, a little bit less than 2 lifetimes. But anyway, what were you saying?
We're only, if my math is right. Is my math right here? Yeah, my math is right. We're only, 2 years away from Jurassic Park being 30 years old?
Yes.
That's crazy to me.
Yes, I know. I don't even like thinking about it. I wasn't going to bring it up.
Well, I'm sorry. I did. We're all depressed now. You were talking about the sound design, though. Was there anything else you want to talk about? I know you talked about the Wilhelm scream, but
like I said, it was just... we've just come a long way, and I didn't realize, it's not that there were some really good scenes because it got my attention. I was like, wait a minute, is this movie gonna not be good?
How disappointing would that be too? If you because we love the Lord of the Rings. I don't love the Lord of the Rings movies nearly as much as some people out there do, but I have seen them numerous times and enjoy them every time.
And especially since you finally got into the fantasy genre.
I feel like I appreciate it even more now. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
How much would it really kind of suck if you were like, I love these movies, and you start watching it and you're like, wow, this movie's not good.
Right. The magic's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
I have a story that's it's not about these movies at all, but have you ever seen the movie Top Secret with Val Kilmer?
No.
It's made by
I don't even think I've heard of that.
It's made by the same people that made like Airplane and stuff like that. So it's one of those really silly, stupid comedies. I think it's hilarious. But I remember years and years ago, at a friend's house, we had gone out to rent a movie, and I chose Top Secret, and I talked it up. I was like, this movie's so funny, it's hilarious. You guys are gonna love it. And we popped it in at their house, and you not a single even chuckle from anyone. It was just I think we turned it off 10 minutes in it. I was like I'm sorry guys, I'm sorry.
It's funny,
was
and
really-
that was I'm sure came from Blockbuster, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I was
Like you had to take the time to like go find the
Yeah,
movie,
yeah.
take it to a counter, and be like, "We want this movie. We're going to spend our money on this movie."
right, exactly. So that was I have not honestly, to be honest with you, I have not watched that movie since then. So I still kind of in my head think it's a great movie and I love it, but I honestly haven't watched it since then, so I don't know if I would actually find it funny or not. But I remember just they were not into it, and so I was like, okay, I guess we'll turn this off now.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
You've gone through like several moments where you're like, "Oh, they'll think this one's funny." And
Right.
you're like watching.
They're like, okay, this joke will get him. This joke is gonna do it. Nothing. Yeah. It's also disappointing, really. So anyway, yeah. I love how this movie starts actually with like seeing kind of what happened to Gandalf in
Yes.
from
Oh, yeah,
Fellowship,
totally.
you know, with the Balrog.
Balrog, yes.
Yeah. I thought that was really, really cool. The first note I took had to do with Sam and Frodo, though, because they are climbing down, a cliff or something, and Sam says something about how he tied the knot himself,
Yeah.
And then
so I actually have. Go ahead. I have something to say about this too.
My question was, does Sam actually because it's kind of a joke, he's like, I tied this knot myself, and he pulls on it and the rope comes down.
Right.
So is it Sam actually just is not very good at tying knots, or is it because it's an elvish rope?
No. So the comment that Frodo makes after that is, I think he says elvish, like he repeats that it's elvish rope, and I think that he was trying to say, your knots would have been good, but because it's an elvish rope, it just comes right.
It comes
off.
done when you need it to come undone, or whatever. Okay, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
That's how I took it. Now my thought was, that whole thing to me almost felt like an deleted scene
with Sam and Frodo and the rope.
Just the comment about the rope.
Oh, okay.
Like the joke almost felt deleted, and I was wondering, and there were a few other moments in this, and I remember saying to you at some point recently in a podcast, I think, that the Lord of the Rings movies were the extended versions, were really the only extended versions of movies that I would rather watch than the originals.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel that way about Fellowship. But I'm very curious to go back, and I'd like to, while it's still fresh in my mind, and watch the theatrical version of Two Towers and see what was added, because there were a few scenes in this movie where I was like, that actually felt extended, and I probably would have rather that not have been in there.
Yeah, and I remember when I agree. I actually had the same exact thought, and if I'd had the time, I would have loved to have done that. Watched the extended version and then gone back and watched the theatrical version right afterwards. And I watched the movie a month ago, so I could probably watch the theatrical version now and still be able to know, okay, they cut that scene out or whatever. But I had the exact same thought, and shoot, what was I going to say? Oh, Peter Jackson. I remember when the extended versions first came out on DVD, people were calling them the director's cut. And Peter Jackson had to kind of correct people and say, it's actually not the director's cut, it's just an extended version.
Interesting.
He was like, I consider the director's cut to be the theatrical version.
Oh, wow.
So and maybe
I did not know that.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I think Peter Jackson's preferred version of the movies are the actual theatrical version.
Huh.
I think people just love the extended versions because you get to see more, but also
there's good stuff in there.
There is
sure
definitely good stuff.
There are a few scenes that I didn't pick up on as being
right
extended, because there's like an hour of
additional material.
Yeah. That's a lot of footage.
Yeah, for sure. And like people who are fans of the books, obviously they get to see more that, some of the stuff that happened in the books that got cut out of the movies, so they get to see more. So I understand why the extended versions
maybe like I said,
so
to me, I think some of the extended is just like some of these comedic scenes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Well, I remember there's one scene that I honestly do not remember, and that was I'm gonna get the character's name wrong here. Let me pull up my notes here. Theodred, the king's
Theoden?
No, it's the king's
his
son.
Okay.
His like funeral scene where Miranda Otto was singing.
Yes.
That I don't remember. So I'm almost positive that was an extended cut scene. Like that was something
Yes,
cut out
I
of the
believe
movie.
you're correct. Yeah.
Of the theatrical version, I mean. And that was another note I wrote was how did he die? Because when Carl Urban found him, he was alive, and then when the king is restored by Gandalf, he's dead. So if it was in the movie, I'm completely missed it. But
I don't remember that either. It might have just been
battle wounds
I guess,
or something. Yeah.
I was gonna say like enough time had passed to where from the time that they found him to that point he had just passed away from the wounds.
Yeah, I was like, wait, did I miss a vital scene here or something? That was the other note I didn't write very many notes, but that was one of the notes I wrote.
Maybe we both missed it. but I don't remember.
I don't either. Hey, how did he die? Let us know. And I've only read the Lord of the Rings books one time, and it was actually not that long ago. It was I think it was either 2016 or 2017, so it was like 3 or 4 years ago, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. So I don't remember Theodred in the books at all, but
there's actually something I have still yet to read, Return of the King, and watching this, I was like, I need to like pick up that book and just start reading it now, since the story's fresh in my mind, and I could literally pick up Return of the King right now, and even though the movies don't end exactly,
right.
like
that was one of the big things I remember being different, because I'd seen the movies a couple times before I read the books, and Boromir dying happens in Fellowship in the movie, but I think happens in Two Towers, the book.
Right, and we were talking about the spider. Right. It's either Shelob or Shelob, however you pronounce it,
and that's at the end of the Two Towers book.
Correct.
But in Return of the King, the movie. Yeah. So they it's interesting how they kind of, shifted it a little bit where the beginning and end points are.
Right, because I was just remembering the scene I was reading in the beginning of Return of the King was Pippin in Gondor, and they're not. Wait, are they there?
No, I don't think so. I
don't think at the end of the movie they had gotten there yet.
The last, granted, I watched this movie a month ago, so I might be wrong, but the last time I remember seeing Pippin and Merry in Two Towers is after Treebeard and his fellow Ents take down Isengard, and they're in the I do remember that scene in the book where they find like the food and the wine and the weed, or it's not weed, what do they call it? I know they don't call it weed, it's something weed in the movie, but
Toby weed,
something like that. Yeah,
I think it's Toby weed.
And they I think that's the last time we see them in Two Towers in the movie, I think, if I recall correctly.
Well, they've got a lot of stuff to do. That just requires their privacy. So
I do remember, because like I said, I've probably seen Return of the King the least amount of times. I think I've only seen Return of the King twice. But one of the things I remember the most from Return of the King is Pippin singing that song for the king while he like eats his food, and you see kind of a montage of stuff going on while Pippin's singing that song.
Right, yeah, I remember that.
So
that's theatrical.
Yeah, oh yeah. That was from the theatrical version, and I love that scene, really. I thought that was a really well done scene.
It's good, yeah.
But I have no idea. I cannot remember for the life of me what happens to Merry. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to rewatching Return of the King and seeing,
because they're separated.
Yeah.
I don't remember either.
We are obviously not Lord of the Rings super fans because we can't remember this stuff.
Well, I mean, I actually have. I'm gonna go. Hold on. I'm not a super fan, as in I can remember the story, obviously, which is kind of important to be a fan.
Right.
But
to be a super
hold on.
fan. While you're getting up, I will say, as much like I love certain things, like I love these movies, and I love certain books and things, but I think my ability to retain information is just not as good as other people's. Because if like, especially after like I'll read a book and I'll love it, and I'll remember it for a couple months, and then after that, I'll start to lose
it's
certain
gone.
details.
I don't remember Hunger Games really at all.
Right, me neither.
And the only reason I probably remember some of it is because of seeing the movie.
Right.
Honestly.
Like, I cannot remember a single thing that happens from the third Hunger Games book especially.
I remember like maybe 2 key points, and that's really it. Anyway,
I just reread. The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, which I've been telling you about, which I love, and I think you should read it. It's a fantasy series. And each book is like 1,000 pages long or 1,200 pages long. And I just reread it because the 4th book just came out back in November. And I was glad I reread it because I thought about just going into the 4th book, just picking up the 4th book and reading it. But so much stuff I forgot about.
So wait a minute. This is a series that hasn't concluded?
Correct. It's apparently a 10-book series, and book 4 just came out.
And the way you just talked about it, I'll have to pick it up.
You should, for sure.
Immediately. I have to read Dune first.
Yes.
And my sister got me Stephen King's, I think, most current book.
I know that one.
It's got a cat on it.
Yeah. I can't think of the name, but yes, I read that one too. It's got like 4 novellas in it.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
is it good?
yeah. Yeah, it was good. One of them is a Holly Gibney story, who was in Mr. Mercedes and Finders Keepers.
I've not read Mr. Mercedes yet.
And The Outsider.
I think my mom just finished Mr. Mercedes.
They're not my favorite King, but they're not bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 of them that kind of follow the same characters. And the second one was my favorite. It was called Finders Keepers. There's Mr. Mercedes, Finders Keepers, and End of Watch. And Finders Keepers, I think, was my favorite of the 3. I really liked Finders Keepers. But it was kind of Stephen King's foray into, kind of the detective thriller kind of thing.
Right.
But it's Stephen King, so there's also the kind of the touch of supernatural element to it and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, they're good, but they're not Stephen King at his best, in my opinion.
Right. Gotcha.
But what the heck is the name of that book?
I can tell you right now.
If It Bleeds. That's what it is. If It Bleeds.
Yes. We were talking about Lord of the Rings fanship, and
Yes.
This is on my wall.
Oh, very nice.
Oh, it's got a glare.
That's really cool. I like that.
I don't remember where it came from. I think it was a Loot Crate.
Oh, okay.
It was, because there was like a Zelda one. It had like Zelda, and I think they mentioned. Oh, and that's where I actually got this cup from too. I showed you before we started.
Yeah.
I've got the
Lord of the Rings, or the Elvish script on the ring.
Yeah, from the ring, correct. Yeah. So I've got a few things. I would consider myself somewhat of a Lord of the Rings fan. I also have the collector's edition. They're broken now for my kids. Thank you guys. Of the I have bookends of the Kings of I don't remember what they're called. Some fan,
there you go. Yeah.
But you know what I'm talking about in Fellowship, where they're standing there and they had their arms out.
Yes.
And then I also have Gondor, a piece of Gondor that's like a little container.
I remember actually those bookends that you were talking about, that came with the extended version of Fellowship. It was like a deluxe version of the extended edition DVD. It was like a big box set thing.
Yeah, I think it was just the standard extended edition DVD, and then it came in a cardboard box that had like a little piece.
Yeah. I remember that, and I think I remember when you got that. For those of you not watching the YouTube video, what John held up was a picture of Treebeard.
Oh yeah,
with hobbits and the Tower of Isengard, kind of in the background, foreground, kind of.
Yeah,
it was like him in Isengard with at least one hobbit I saw on top.
And
of him.
it was both Pippin and Merry are on top of it, and I believe it's Pippin that's pointing at the Tower of Isengard,
it's a cool photo. Yeah,
it's really cool. I also used to have, and I know you probably remember this, a photo framed, and I think I still have the picture. I don't think my kids ripped it up, but the frame definitely got broken. But of Neo, if you remember, he was like in the position where he has like the assault rifle in his arm, and he's like, I guessing he's shooting at the helicopter.
Oh, yeah.
That was like one of my favorite prints too.
Wait, shooting at the helicopter. I was thinking him in the helicopter, but that was
No.
like a minigun.
No, he's got an assault rifle, and he's like got his trench coat and glasses, and he's like just holding it, and it doesn't show what he's shooting at, but he's on top of the building.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, anyway, it's a really cool picture.
That is pretty cool. Well, let's. I don't know if we want to.
And well, I was going to say this. I wasn't going to bring it up, but I will. I was going to say it's related to Lord of the Rings. My ex-wife was obsessed with Lord of the Rings, like beyond me. Like she loved freaking Lord of the Rings. But now that I'm pretty recently divorced, I have some spots on my wall that need covered.
And some posters up there and stuff.
I'm trying to think of some good things. Like I said, I just hung up not too long ago that I just bumped my nose into the microphone. That picture on my wall, and I need to figure out some cool stuff to just put on my walls.
I have
a Spider-Man, like a painted Spider-Man picture of him from the original movie, Tobey Maguire, and I think he's on the flag.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, it's a big picture, and I want that actually next to my bed.
I was going to say, I have more movie posters than I think I will ever have wall space. So if you want some movie posters, I'm sure I could give you.
You remember we used to collect them together. You obviously collected a lot more than I did, but I still do. I think it got destroyed recently, but I had American Beauty, Garden State.
Yeah.
I had Closer. I had Batman Begins. I had Troy.
I remember Troy.
Because I used to be heavily supporter of Brad. Not that I'm not now, but Brad Pitt was like
your favorite actor, perhaps. Was he your favorite actor back then?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's no question.
Yeah.
No question. That was like around Mr. and Mrs. Smith time.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember that. And I remember you being super excited for Troy, and then were you let down by the movie?
I was let down, but then I watched it again later, and I was like, that actually wasn't that bad.
That's another movie I haven't seen since the theater, and I own the DVD, which has the theatrical version, but I also own the Blu-ray, which has the director's cut, which is over 3 hours long, which is part of the reason why I haven't watched it. But I have been curious to just watch it again, either the theatrical or director's cut, just because I'm curious if it is.
It's not bad.
Yeah, how it is.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not like, obviously, it was super hyped.
It was.
At the time.
I think that was the problem. I think it was like, I don't know if, was it super hyped everywhere, or was it just super hyped in our minds? Like, we had hyped ourselves up for it.
Dude, it was Brad Pitt. It was hyped. Like,
it looked really good.
I remember
from
I
the
would
preview
see
and
pictures like online of people like had taken pictures of Brad Pitt like in his like armor, and he was like on his cell phone. Like,
yeah, I remember that.
Like, yeah, it was people were paying attention. He had also grown his hair really long for that movie, which was like something new that he hadn't done. And he was it was Eric Bana was in that movie too, and
Orlando Bloom. Legolas.
He was. That's right. Different character.
Tying it right back into Two Towers.
Nice. Let's go that way.
I don't know if I have any Lord of the Rings movie posters.
I didn't. Oh, you know what? Maybe I did. It seems like I might have had a fellowship.
I have tubes of posters up in the attic.
That's
that
crazy.
I know I like. Maybe I'll win the lottery or something one day and be able to afford a mansion and have just walls.
Just have a room
posters.
dedicated.
Or a floor, like a level of rooms dedicated to movies and movie posters. That would be sweet. Currently, the only posters I have in my house right now are, I've got Batman versus Superman right here next to me. In the spare bedroom, I've got Back to the Future. And that's on the wall going up the stairs, I've got Superman the movie, Superman Returns, and Man of Steel.
That was one of the first pictures you sent me when you moved into that house.
I was pretty proud of that.
Look at my stairs.
And then in the what we call the sunroom, it's not really a sunroom, but where I keep all my movies and everything, I've got The Avengers, Pulp Fiction, and The Dark Knight. So, not as many posters up as I would like, but it's about as many as I was allowed to put up. I still kind of want to put up one in my bedroom.
You need a couple behind you right now.
I know. I've been trying to convince my wife to let me put up some on that wall, but because that's her wall, because her desk is right here.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about that.
Because like I wish I almost should do the podcast from her side, because I've got Superman and Batman right here, these figures right here. I just bought some Batman like actual masks, like cowls, that I'm gonna hopefully post on the wall here, and you can't see it on here, like it's in front of me rather than behind me. I've thought about different things about what I could kind of do to spruce up my background for this video, but I know this bare wall behind me needs a movie poster badly.
Speaking of which, I am actually planning on maybe getting a green screen. And
I thought about that too, because then you could do a virtual background.
Yeah. And I've got an idea of what I want to put behind me. So we'll see if that happens.
You should do it. All right, so back to Lord of the Rings, right?
Yes.
I don't think we should go through this movie beat by beat like we do with a lot of movies, just because it's a 4-hour movie and it would.
And how long are we into recording?
Right, exactly. So I think we could just kind of.
I mean, we've talked about it too for a good, Anyway, yes.
We'll just do a broad overview, but I do have a specific moment I want to bring up, and that is the part. So they get to Mount Doom. Gollum actually, which we haven't even talked about Gollum yet, but Gollum actually takes Frodo and Sam to like the gates of Mount Doom. And then I forget exactly what happens. I think Sam like falls over or something, and Frodo kind of follows him, and he throws an elvish cloak over them, and it makes him look like a rock.
Yes. I remember you. And what's funny is when I watched this scene, I thought of you, and I was like, Justin brought this up at some point.
Oh, really?
And I don't remember when it was, if it was in a podcast or just in conversation, but I remembered you pointing this out in the past. Go ahead.
Was I speaking negatively of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I don't like it.
And I agree with you, because the cloak, it's
a cloak. But
what's interesting is, so when he removes it, because I was thinking that too. I was like, it looks like a rock. I know it's not, but it does. And then he moves it, and I was like, oh, the material kind of has that like style to it.
Right.
But then it cuts to them like a few seconds later, and it's totally different material, and I was like, nope, never mind. Can't accept
right,
it.
yeah. I mean, the only reason why I kind of let it slide is because they say it's an elvish cloak, and I was like, okay, maybe there's like kind of some magic to it or something, type of thing.
When did they say that?
I don't remember.
If they say that, it's intentional, and it's to get you to
believe that scene. Yeah.
Yep.
But I remember not liking. I do remember not liking it before, and I wrote it as a note. I was like, it's just kind of, it just doesn't work for me. Like that it's like those guys are really close, and he throws the cloak over, and then it immediately looks like a rock. I just don't buy it. It's the same thing in. It's funny you brought up the Hunger Games, because there's.
Yeah, I was going to say Catching Fire, right?
No, it's the first one that
first one?
Yeah, the first one.
Oh.
PETA in the first movie, he is like a cake decorator, and so he's supposedly good at that. And in the movie, I think it's more believable in the book, but in the movie, he has like done.
Well, it's because in the book you have him in your mind what it looks like, and
right.
you're like, well, if he's doing it this way, and then you kind of imagine how it could be believable. But yeah, when it's presented to you, it's like so like.
In the book, I feel like it was just camouflage. He just like painted his face like brown and green and gray or whatever, and he kind of blended in with the background. In the movie, he's done like this like movie style practical makeup effects of blending him in with the rock and everything.
Right.
And I was like, no. Like that.
Yeah.
That scene.
You haven't played Metal Gear Solid, have you?
No, I have never played Metal Gear Solid.
In Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake, the character, has a suit that has the technology to literally digitally turn into It's actually Metal Gear Solid 4. I'm sorry. I'm sure we've got some Metal Gear Solid fans that listen. I would imagine they would. Anyway, yeah, it's got like these It has like this nanotechnology basically that can like sense what
Is
the
around
background
you.
around you is, and then it'll like digitally turn your suit to look like that. And that's
It's
basically
like an
I know what you're talking
invisibility
about.
cloak with
Yes, and that's basically what
nanotechnology.
PETA did
Yes.
in the Hunger Games. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's the one, like, I like the Hunger Games movie fine, but that's the one moment in the movie where it just takes me out of it. I'm just like, there's no way that he was able to lie down on the ground and like makeup affect himself into the rock. Basically, it was way too far fetched.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to Lord of the Rings.
Let's talk about some of the characters.
Sure.
Couple notes I took.
A lot of new
Aragorn.
characters in this movie, actually.
There are.
I think that's part of the reason why I was not as into this movie originally. Again, I wasn't really into the fantasy genre when I saw these movies originally, but also like I had been set up in the first movie with the Fellowship. Excuse me, with with Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas and Frodo and Sam and Gandalf, and then in this movie they introduce Carl Urban's character, Miranda Otto's character, and King Theoden, and we see Boromir's brother, whose name I don't remember,
Right.
and
Faramir.
Yeah, Faramir, and the King of Gondor and stuff like that. It was just like there was a lot of characters that were kind of just thrown at us.
And he had I don't remember his name, but basically like the Snape-like.
Oh, Wormtongue. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
Wormtongue.
that's Brad Dourif, and I do appreciate that actor, and he does a great job, I think, as Wormtongue.
I've never seen. Well, maybe I have. I just didn't know.
You probably
Obviously,
didn't know
wouldn't recognize him because of his makeup. Like, yeah, his character's fantastic.
That actor is the voice of Chucky in Child's Play.
Oh,
and the Chucky
and he
movies.
plays. And doesn't he play the bad guy? Wait, are you talking about the original?
Yeah, I think he is the bad guy in the original. I haven't seen the original in a long time, but I think he plays the.
I'm pretty sure, yeah, because like I'm thinking about the guy that plays him, and I could see it being the same guy because he kind of looks like that. Just he has that look.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, there are a lot of new characters. I was going to talk about Aragorn and mention that he says he's 87 years old.
Yeah.
And I don't remember them talking about him having age anything in Fellowship. So, like you and I were talking, this is maybe the 5th time I've seen this movie, and I didn't remember that, and just it blew me away. I'm like, 87,
Right.
but he's. They mentioned that he's part of a race that that happens to. Is he maybe like half elf?
I don't know. There's that whole scene with Hugo Weaving and Liv Tyler, Arwen, and it kind of annoys me that I can't remember Hugo Weaving's character's name. Elrond. There we go. And Elrond is telling Arwen, he's kind of trying to talk her out of being in love with Aragorn because he's a human and he's going to die, and
Right.
and you are going to live on as an elf.
It's a very effective scene too.
Yeah.
And then when it cuts back to her, she's crying. Like that whole scene, which was theatrical as well, was I believe it was just very impactful. I always remember that scene, and I remember every time that scene starts, the emotion that it's going to kind of draw.
But I mean, if he's 87 and he looks like
he's gonna be a few hundred years old before he dies.
Yeah. So I mean, they're gonna have more time together than she
But
would
it doesn't
with
matter.
a normal human. But I guess elves just live that much longer.
No, elves are immortal.
Oh, are they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they don't die unless they can die, but not from age.
I didn't know that. Is that
That's why
explained
he
in the
mentions
movie, or is
that's
that
he mentions that like when he goes to her and they have that conversation where he's like, I'm leaving, and she's like, or he's like, I'm not coming back, and she's like, oh, you're a better fighter than that. You don't give yourself enough credit. He's like, no, I mean, like, I'm not coming back. He's like, you're mortal, or I'm mortal. He mentions that.
I do remember that conversation. I guess it just didn't like click in my brain that's what he
she's
was saying.
immortal.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's crazy. That means Legolas is immortal too, I guess, huh?
Right.
Unless he gets killed.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you have
Because there were elves that were killed in the Helm's Deep battle, but
exactly.
But they don't die of old age.
So I was thinking about that. I was like, if I was an elf, and I like knew that if I didn't like have a tragedy or something, and I would live forever, like I'd probably just hang out in a chair and just watch all the Netflix shows.
The I don't remember the character's name, but the guy that like leads the elven army to Helm's Deep, he's like, we're going to fight for whatever, for Middle Earth. And the elf is like, let's see here. Let's think about this.
We could die.
Yeah, if I go, I could die. If I stay here, I will not die. I'm going to stay here.
I thought the same thing, too, when they showed up. Yeah.
That just shows you how cool the elves are, though. They're willing to...
Yeah, exactly. It speaks a lot. They're willing to sacrifice immortality.
Yeah.
For these other people. Well, technically, that's another note I wrote was Galadriel. She said some crazy stuff that I never really paid attention to, and it really hit me this time. Was one, she mentions, who's she talking to? I think it's Elrond that she's talking to. And they have like this telepathy kind of, communication, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's Elrond that she's talking to. And she mentions one that the quest is going to take Frodo's life. And if for whatever reason someone's listening to this and they haven't watched Return of the King, I'm not going to go any further than that. 2, it mentions that Sauron, she mentions, and I'd say that she has a pretty good knowledge as to what she's talking about. You remember who Galadriel is,
yes,
right?
yeah, Kate Blanchett,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. She mentions that if Sauron is successful, not only will he be successful in ruling the world, but it will literally be till the end of the age. Like, there will never be a time, if he takes over, there will never be a time that Sauron will not be in power again.
Wow.
So until the basically extinction of existence, Sauron will be in control. That's pretty freaky.
Yeah.
So if you guys lose, there's no hope of coming back around again.
No pressure or anything. But
not only that, but she doesn't really say if you lose. It's kind of like she's making prediction that this is what's going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong, but she does mention that that the quest will take Frodo's life.
So Galadriel, now that you're talking about Galadriel and you're mentioning these things, is Galadriel, I know she's an elf, but like, is she an elf with like...
She's like she's like the high elf.
Okay, so maybe is she kind of gifted with a certain kind of power of...
Yeah, she's like, yeah, exactly.
Foresight or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, because if you remember, like in Fellowship, she has like major moments with Frodo and stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. She's got some kind of divine abilities there.
Let's talk about Treebeard. We haven't talked about... we haven't talked about Gollum yet, but let's talk about Treebeard for a minute. Treebeard, I actually think, is one of my favorite characters from the Two Towers. I just like his character. I think he's fun. I like the Ents. Totally. I remember from reading the book, I remember how it takes the Ents forever to do anything. And when they talk,
I don't remember
and
it in the book,
and everything.
But I remember in this, it still makes me laugh.
He's like,
we just got done saying good morning.
morning.
And Mary's like, it's night. It's already nighttime.
Yeah, it's great. Treebeard, of course, was voiced by John Rhys Davies, the same guy that played Gimli.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. I actually have a John Rhys Davies shirt that I designed and had printed out.
Ultimate fan of John Rhys Davies.
It was just an inside joke thing, but I am a big. I will say I am a big fan of John Rhys Davies as well.
Have you ever seen the Incredible Hulk TV movie where John Rhys Davies plays Kingpin?
No.
Me neither, but we should watch it and we should talk about it.
Sounds good. You said John Rhys Davies is in it, and he's a major character apparently. Yeah, let's do it.
It's I think it's the trial of the Incredible Hulk. It's with Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby. and it's Matt Murdock is in it. So like Daredevil character is in it, and then I'm pretty sure, I know it's John Rhys Davies, and I'm pretty sure he plays Kingpin. It was a made-for-TV movie, so I'm not sure how. I mean, it's probably not very good, but
Right.
we should watch it and talk about it. It'd be fun.
When you said the Incredible Hulk movie where John Rhys Davies plays Kingpin, my immediate thought was it's probably not very good. But especially since didn't know that John Rhys Davies played
Kingpin, yeah,
in a made-for-TV movie of the Incredible Hulk.
There's at least 3 TV Incredible Hulk movies, and I've only seen one of them. I've only seen the death of the Incredible Hulk, which I remember liking. But there's the trial of the Incredible Hulk, and then I can't remember if it's like the Incredible Hulk Returns or something like that. But Thor is in that one.
Wow.
I have them all on DVD, but
I've only seen like one episode, I think, of that show, and it was, I believe, the first one because it wasn't even Blockbuster, but there was like another video rental place where
they had the pilot on VHS or something.
Yeah, and I rented it.
I used to watch that show. Obviously, it was reruns, but I used to watch that show a lot when I was a kid. I really liked it, and I remember renting the pilot as well, and watching it as a kid.
I remember a distinct scene from that pilot, and it was them talking about, it was like someone got trapped under a car.
Yeah, his wife. It was either his wife or his girlfriend. I forget who it was.
Was it or was it Bruce Banner?
Yeah. Well, his name in the show is David Banner. Yeah. The reason for that is the guy that, like, I guess adapted the comic into, the guy who wrote the script, I guess, the showrunner of the show or whatever. He felt that the alliterative names, Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, Reed Richards, was too comic booky, and so he was trying to get away from, even though he was making an adaptation of the Incredible Hulk
of a guy that turns into a giant green guy.
Right, exactly. Yeah. He thought Bruce Banner was too much, so he changed it to David.
That's hilarious.
If you, in the opening credits of the show, if you see him go like to his, because he goes to his grave because he's people assume he's dead. The whole series is him living on the road, moving from town to town, assuming a different identity in every town type of thing. So in the opening credits, it shows him walking up to his own grave, and on the headstone, it says David Bruce Banner. So they gave Bruce as his middle name, at least.
Gotcha. Interesting.
But yeah, that's the whole kind of premise of the pilot is he gets into a car accident and his wife dies, and he was not able to like summon the strength to lift the car or open the door to get her out. And
I thought he did.
He interviews all these people
because they talk about adrenaline.
Right. He like interviews all these people who were able to like lift the car and stuff like that. And he's trying to figure out why it didn't happen for him.
That's what stuck out to me was like, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. People can actually like lift cars with adrenaline?
Right.
Like, I was like actually 8, so I don't even know why I knew what adrenaline. I'm sure that was the first time I'd even heard of adrenaline, but for whatever reason, I knew that it wasn't.
You were just like, people can lift cars with this thing called adrenaline?
But
give me this thing called adrenaline.
For whatever reason, I knew that the adrenaline. I don't remember if I asked I don't know why, but I knew that for whatever reason, maybe hearing it in class later, but adrenaline was.
It's like 20 years later, you're in college or something.
I'm like, wait a minute.
I know this.
The Hulk. It was real. I don't know. Anyway, let's get back to Lord of the Rings.
Sure. Well, let's talk about Gollum. Let's talk, because there was in Fellowship we never really saw Gollum. We just I think there was like
speak. He might say he might do the Gollum cough. I think
he might even say
my precious
or something.
Yeah.
But you see him in the shadows, kind of. You don't ever really get to see him at all. So this is the first movie where we actually see Gollum in the flesh. Also, this is the first movie, if I'm not mistaken, that used motion capture like on set. Like what do they call it? Like they actually, because I don't know if it was the first like motion capture performance. Yeah, but it was the first one where they kind of like had the person in the motion capture outfit on the set acting with the other actors kind of thing.
I got what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it
that makes
still
sense,
looks pretty good 20 years, almost 20 years later.
Yeah, that was something that I was going to mention earlier was you can see some of the green screen now that I
A
could
little
never-
bit, yeah.
that I honestly even not too long ago probably wouldn't have really been able to pick up on as much, but yeah, no, you're right. You can see obviously it's CGI, but he blends in with the environment to where it's still believable. And I
Yeah.
don't know if it's because we grew up with him to a degree. Obviously we were in like high school, college when these movies were coming out, but like we were saying, that was 20 years ago.
Right.
So
It looked amazing 20 years ago. I know that.
yeah, it really did. Especially the troll and like Fellowship, and then I remember seeing Sorcerer's Stone and still being impressed with the troll and Sorcerer's Stone, but being like, that wasn't as good as Lord of the Rings.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, you can still see CGI, but yeah, it 20 years old, it holds up
Yeah, it still looks pretty
really
good.
well.
I feel like the times where I kind of noticed it the most, where I was like, okay, I can kind of see the fakeness, I guess, is like when he's moving quickly kind of near Sam or Frodo. Like if Sam or Frodo are in the frame with him, and like I'm thinking about the time where like Sam has him on a leash basically, and he's kind of pulling him and stuff. I feel like there's a couple times there where I was like, okay, I can kind of tell that it's...
I could only really tell when they were like physically interacting with him. Like I think there was one time where like they were wrestling or something.
Yeah, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. But otherwise, I mean, and Andy Serkis's performance is still top notch.
Oh man, yeah. Like I hadn't heard of Andy Serkis before this.
No, me neither. Actually,
I would imagine most. Yeah, I was gonna. If you haven't heard of him, then no one had. Yeah, wow. And then he goes on obviously to show not only how he can continuously be a fantastic motion capture actor, but he's gone on now to be in things, like the adventure movies and just and display that he can also just be a good actor too. Andy Serkis is one of those actors where you're like, he has to be somewhat big-headed because of how good he is.
Just how good he is.
And how much people have told him how, that he's just been praised for years nonstop.
And not only is he an amazing actor, but he's also a director as well. He's directing the Venom sequel, which comes out later this year.
That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Which has a lot of motion capture probably elements to it. So I feel like that's part of the reason why. Not that I know of, but he might have a small part or something. I don't know, but he's directing it, and I'm sure Tom Hardy plays Venom with motion capture. I don't know for a fact, but I would be surprised if that's kind of how they do it. And who better to direct, motion capture actors than
true.
Pretty much the king of motion capture, which is Andy Serkis.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
Andy Serkis is fantastic. Who else we got? Ian McKellen, obviously continuing his. Yeah. Now, what's so cool is I remember watching Fellowship and thinking, I was like, I think they just went maybe a little bit too grumpy with Ganondorf, or with Ganon, mixing Zelda in now. Gandalf, and then in this, when he becomes Gandalf the White, like you don't have that grumpiness anymore. So there was that intentional thing of in Fellowship, he's kind of a grumpier old,
right, different kind of personality.
Yeah. And now he's, and I was reminded that when he goes unconscious after the battle with the Balrog, that he's literally in a unconscious state for like what he says feels like thousands of years.
It's crazy.
And that's how he comes back as he doesn't even remember who he is.
Right.
And then they mention his name and he's like,
oh yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Such a cool concept that they really get across easily of this guy's been gone and he's been gone so long. He doesn't even remember being Gandalf, but then he has that moment and he comes back and it's really cool.
That is super cool. I forgot about that. It's one of the things that I never really remember is how he becomes Gandalf the White. I know he fights the Balrog.
It's because of the time.
Because so much time has passed.
Yeah, he's just basically become super wise and
okay.
Yeah. He's also basically now on level with Saruman.
Yeah.
Which is super cool.
Saruman's a white wizard as well.
Right, and I also love how they introduce Gandalf as Gandalf the White when you first see him, and
they think it's Saruman.
Yeah, it was Treebeard, right, that throws Pippin and Merry.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah,
and
it
just shows his back, and you're like,
oh no,
Treebeard.
Right. Yep. That's right. So actually, I was wrong. Earlier, I said Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are the first to see Gandalf, but that's actually right.
It's actually Pippin and Merry.
Yep. And we're if you don't know the story, we're led to think they were thrown in front of Saruman.
Right.
It's actually Gandalf. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the Carl Urban, whose character I can't remember the name of.
I can't either.
I might have it
write
here.
it down.
This was you're talking about how you didn't know who he is. Éomer. Does that sound right? Eomer.
Yes.
Éomer.
I think it's Éomer.
Éomer. You were talking about how you didn't know who Andy Serkis was before this movie. I didn't know who Carl Urban was before this movie. And it was one of those things where in this movie he's kind of got the long blonde hair, and so when you see him in other movies and he's got the dark hair, you're kind of like At first you're like, he looks weird. And now that I've seen enough Carl Urban movies where he's got dark hair, he looks weird now with blonde hair.
Yes. That's funny. I didn't know who Carl Urban was until Dread.
Oh, really? Well, he had done Star Trek before.
I know. But I just was like, oh, it's the guy that plays Scotty. But
Bones.
And even seeing Dread, I didn't, Bones. Even seeing Dread, I didn't connect, but his performance at Dread made me. Also, I think there was maybe he had been being thrown out as a fan favorite of someone that could play Batman.
Oh, interesting.
And this was around Dread, and he stood out to me with Dread, and then finding out later, I was like, oh, it's the guy that plays Bones.
Yeah.
But speaking of Dread, just real quick off topic, because we do anyway.
Right.
Dread needs a sequel. And
yes.
I don't think we're ever going to get it.
No, I don't think we are either. But I would love to see Dread either get a Dread 2 or a TV show. I would love to even just have a season of a show with Carl Urban as Dread.
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
Amazon or Netflix or whatever. I think that would be incredible. You were talking about he was the front runner to play who? Who did you say?
I didn't say he was necessarily the front runner. He was a fan
fan favorite
mention as Batman.
Oh, God, Batman. Right. I feel like I remember hearing something about him being, and maybe it was a fan favorite too, or maybe he was actually in talks to play Snake Plissken in the Escape from New York remake, which I pray to God never happens.
Yeah, no, agreed.
But I don't know if I might be remembering that incorrectly, but I feel like I remember maybe hearing something about Carl Urban perhaps playing Snake Plissken, which he would do a great job at. But again, I really hope that just never doesn't happen. I just rather not see a remake of Escape from New York.
I agree. That's John Carpenter's thing, and Kurt Russell.
Yeah. So I didn't know. Going back to Lord of the Rings, I didn't know who Carl Urban was until I saw this movie, at least. And then I feel like the next movie I remember seeing him in was Bourne Supremacy. I think he was in that one.
Oh.
But that, yeah. Anyway, King Theoden.
Yes.
I always thought that was a kind of an interesting storyline with him, how he was corrupted by Saruman.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What's funny is, do you remember we did a podcast on it? So you have seen the movie, the Mario Brothers movie.
Yes, of course.
And every time I see his transition back to the young, and they actually do it now that it's funny because they did it in the movie because of Super Mario Brothers 3. which
Oh, really?
was did you ever play Super Mario Bros. 3?
Yeah, but I probably didn't get very far.
If you get at least to the first boss in the first world, like, and it's a continual theme in the game, the king has been transformed into like some crazy creature.
Oh, okay.
And in the Mario Brothers movie, the king is transformed into all that fungus. If you remember, that's like kind of growing throughout the world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the movie, it shows the fungus like falls kind of into a throne, and like he like kind of fades into the king.
I do remember that. Yep.
And
What a
every
weird
time,
movie.
huh?
I said, what a weird movie.
Yeah, it was. But every time in Lord of the Rings, when I see that transition of him going back from the old to the, like, I always think of that kind of Mario thing.
Yeah. Yep.
But who plays him?
The actor's name is, well, I thought I had it, but I don't. There it is. Bernard Hill. And the only other movie that I really know him from, honestly, is Titanic. He was the captain of Titanic.
Oh, yeah. The second you said that, it hit me. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's really good. Let's talk about Faramir. Faramir is Boromir's brother. He comes across Pippin and Merry after they escape from the orcs. Oh, there was a moment we didn't talk about with Gimli, Aragorn, and Legolas kind of trying to find Pippin and Merry, and they think that they have been killed.
Oh yeah, that was a great scene too.
Yeah,
because their reaction to that, the acting for their reaction to that was really well done.
And Vigo, Aragorn kicks a helmet. He kicks the helmet and falls to his knees, kind of cries out in anguish because he thinks the hobbits have been killed. Apparently, when Viggo Mortensen kicked that helmet, he actually broke his toe.
Oh, I think I'd heard that.
Yeah. And so him kind of falling to his knees and stuff was him, like, I think it kind of helped his acting. He's like, I just broke my toe. But yeah, Faramir, I like the actor that plays Faramir. I was thinking about this when I was watching it. He was in this movie. He was in 300. And I think I've seen him in like one or two other things, but I have not seen him recently at all. His name is David Wenham. And I like him as an actor and everything. And I like him as Faramir, and it's interesting, when because it's interesting. He's the one that actually tells Merry and Pippin that Boromir is dead, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, so they don't even know, which I thought was kind of interesting, because I think Frodo and Sam, they have to.
But he says, but yeah, he mentions that he's dead, and then they're like, "What?" And then they're like, "How'd he die?" And he was like, "I was hoping you could tell me." So he actually
he doesn't know how he died. He just knows he's dead. Yeah. But I do like that we get a Sean Bean flashback.
Yes, and I was also going to ask, was that theatrical?
I can't remember. So that's another reason why I kind of want to go back and rewatch the theatrical version.
But it's a good. He's got a good chunk in there.
I vaguely remember it, so I feel like it is theatrical. But I couldn't. I honestly don't remember because I think I've seen Two Towers 4 times. I saw it twice in the theater, and then years later I watched the extended version, and then I watched the extended version again for this. So the last time I watched the movie was the extended version. So if that's why it seems vaguely familiar, it might be because I watched the extended version the last time. So I don't know. I really do need to go back and rewatch the theatrical version again.
I actually have a note about Faramir. When he sees the ring on Frodo,
yeah,
and he gets that like hypnotized state, that is very common among people that focus in on the ring. And I was wondering, and I can't remember why there's this hypnotizing power. Is it something the ring's doing to them, or do they know what the ring?
I think it's something the ring is doing to them. Yeah.
So it's not it's not the lust for power that's hypnotizing them?
That's not how I take it. I take it as like, because I think a lot of them know that the ring is powerful, but at the same time, like when they look at it, I feel like the ring is like
Or maybe the ring's tapping into their, like, because I think there's
into their lust for power.
yeah,
because
because I think some men are more susceptible to being hypnotized than others.
Yeah.
Obviously, Boromir was very weak to the ring.
Right.
And this being his brother, and then having that scene, you kind of get that suspense of, is the brother going to be?
He's gonna do it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Another thing I was thinking about is, if they know it's powerful, do they, like, obviously this ring has gone down in legend
Yeah.
for its power, and there are people that were known to have it and wear it.
Mm-hmm.
Did it make them invisible?
Well, from the prologue of Fellowship, I don't think so. Because remember,
Right.
that is it. It's not. Is it Sauron? It's not. Is it Sauron who wears the ring in the prologue?
Sauron is the one that makes the ring.
Okay,
He's the eye.
whoever that dude is, yeah, I mean, I know that, but whoever that dude is in the prologue who wears the ring like on his forefinger that you can't see his face, he's got all the armor.
Yes,
who gets his hand cut off.
Yes, that's Sauron.
Okay, that is Sauron. He's not invisible when he's wearing the ring on his,
Correct.
at least on his armored finger. But
then there's the king, that Aragorn's descendant, that is the one that chops off the fingers and the ring,
and he wears it,
and he wears it, and he's not invisible. But I don't remember, like, they show a scene of him like going through the woods with a escort, and they're on horseback, and I don't know if he was wearing the ring on his neck or on his finger, but
I think it's on his neck, actually.
Okay. But my question is, when did it start making, obviously, like you said, and you're right, Sauron's wearing it, and he's not invisible, so.
But he is also wearing it on an armored finger. That's what I'm wondering, if it's
if it like has to touch flesh.
Yeah, I don't know. Because it made Bilbo invisible.
But here's another question. If it could make Sauron invisible, why would he not want to make him
right,
invisible?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that one.
Yeah, it's just questions I'm throwing out there.
Right.
Universe is all. So that's something I wrote down.
Basically, what I would like to say about the cast of The Two Towers, or really the Lord of the Rings trilogy, is that it's pretty perfect casting. Everybody's really good, and I don't know if there's anybody that I would replace with a different actor.
No, and this is, like you said, with the escape movies, I would be sad and curious, not excited. I'd be sad and curious if I were to ever hear that there was going to be a reboot.
A remake, yeah. I try to tell myself that, like, to not get worked up over remakes, because just because they're remaking a movie doesn't mean that the original is going to be erased or anything, you know what I mean? So if they're remaking this movie, whatever, it's really no big deal. It's like when Ghostbusters came out with, I guess you could call it a reboot of Ghostbusters with the all-female cast, there was a lot of people were just hateful of it, And I was like, whatever, it's cool. It doesn't get rid of the original movie. There's no big deal. But there are certain movies where if they were to announce a remake of it, I think I would just be upset. And Escape from New York is one of them, and like Back to the Future is another one. Like if they were to announce a Back to the Future remake, I'd just be like, why? And Two Towers, or not Two Towers specifically, but the Lord of the Rings. Like I just don't think. I mean, these movies are just so good. I don't see why you would want to remake them.
Right. Well, it's funny because, like I was saying, for me, I was kind of shocked because there were moments where I was kind of picking out some of the not aging well stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like you said, they're so good. And I think one of the things that really gives them the glue for that is the fact of how original they were when they first came out. There really was no fantasy movie that had been done in a way that could be considered truly good that I could think of.
No, me neither.
Like the closest one I could think of would have been a really, really old movie at the time. Well, now, maybe not so old at the time, since we were talking about the scale of time earlier, but which was maybe like Clash of Titans?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there were fantasy movies.
and that's like a different fantasy. That's like
Right.
Greek mythology.
Right. Yeah, that's true. There was like Dragonheart, and there was
Dragonheart's not Lord of the Rings fantasy. Like, it's got a dragon, but other than that, like, it's just...
I think it has a wizard too. And you've got like Willow, and you've got there's Lady Hawk.
Willow,
I think is a fantasy
yes,
movie.
but Willow was not that well known of a movie.
Basically, my point is there were fantasy movies, but none of them were as good as these movies are.
Right.
Like, nothing had been done, and also, honestly, in my opinion, nothing was done on such a large scale as these movies were.
That is so true, because when these were delivered and you saw how much had been put into these movies, it was just like, it was insane. It was like, literally this was literally we're going to try to do a Star Wars level success of a film with another genre, and we're going to do it with fantasy.
Right.
And they did it, and it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
absolutely.
awesome.
And it's I am really looking forward to talking about the Hobbit movies, but it's we all know the Hobbit movies were not nearly as well received as the Lord of the Rings movies.
I'll get behind that. We'll talk about that later.
It's a shame because obviously same director.
Yeah, it's just
and all
crazy.
That. But I think there were some reasons for it. Part of the reason I think for it is that they split that one book into 3 movies. That's part of the reason.
And it's it's a smaller book than than any of the
3 Lord of the Rings books.
Yes.
So really, there was the only reason for that was
money.
That was a money issue, and that was clearly a studio issue or a studio decision, I think. And
if they have the ability, if they're that much power to where they're like, we're going to make 3 movies out of this, then you've already established that the studio is heavily involved.
Right. So it's a shame that the Hobbit movies are not as good as the Lord of the Rings movies, but
yeah, because honestly, The Hobbit was the first book I ever read by my own choosing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were a few chapter books I'd read before The Hobbit, but it was for school.
Right.
And The Hobbit was like a book where I watched the Hobbit animated movie at a very young age. I was like 4 years old, and it really stuck with me. And I picked up the library book in 8th grade, returned it. That was at a public school, and then when I went to North Cobb Christian, I found it there. Actually, I think I bought it at a bookstore, and I had at a library there. I had a library class, and I had extra time, and I would read The Hobbit like during my time at the library. And I finished it, and that really obviously felt like a huge accomplishment that I read a chapter book by myself. Yeah. And so The Hobbit the point of that is The Hobbit means a lot to me.
I've
got a history with The Hobbit.
Right.
And when the Lord of the Rings movies were announced, I was super excited, but I had not read them. And I, obviously was like, it would have been cool if they'd done The Hobbit, but I'm excited to see what happens after The Hobbit, because I didn't plan on reading the Lord of the Rings books per se. I actually did buy Fellowship and started it before the movie came out, but I only got like 2 or 3 chapters in. And then all the movies I watched without having read the books.
Yeah. I tried to read the first book after Fellowship came out, and did not get very far. I don't think I even made it through the first chapter. I just, for whatever reason, wasn't connecting with it. And
understandable. In the book, especially, well, no, it's all throughout the books. There's so much, even me being such a big fan of the Lord of the Rings movies, there are sections, and frequently it happens, of moments where Tolkien is just describing the pathways that they take and the turns, like they turn left here, and you're like, and it's like 2 or 3 pages, and it's hard. It can be hard to get through sometimes.
Well, honestly, I think it was the prologue that I couldn't get through. It was like, I think the prologue is called Concerning Hobbits, and it was just all about like kind of Hobbit history and stuff. And I just remember being like, nope. Now I've read it now, and I love it now. But and I think
it's really well written.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's it was the birth of a new genre almost.
It really was.
Yeah.
Like I think I've heard that he has had some influence from other things. I don't know what they were, but he really was the one that made it bloom. And I would say that if it hadn't been for Tolkien, that there wouldn't have been even like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah.
Which Dungeons and Dragons, I would argue, was really what pushed the genre and made it to where it wasn't going to go away.
Right.
Because after that, there were so many more authors that came out and wrote their own versions of fantasy, and it kind of took off from there.
Yeah.
But
well, it's funny too, because like when I read some fantasy books, like I'll read the introduction or I'll read the acknowledgments or whatever, and those authors talk about how they were given like a copy of Lord of the Rings, and that's what made them want to be a writer or something. It's like he inspired so many different fantasy authors. It's unreal. So yeah, he's definitely we have him to thank for the modern day fantasy genre, I believe.
Yeah, you've got your orcs and your trolls and your ogres, and that's all stuff that's throughout all traditional fantasy now, and it all rooted from Tolkien.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. Well, this episode's pretty long, so let's go ahead and skip ahead to Helm's Deep. Let's talk about Helm's Deep.
Okay.
The main thing that I love about the Battle of Helm's Deep is Gimli and Legolas's rivalry. I love. I'm not going to remember the exact numbers, obviously, but I remember Gimli turns to Legolas at one point, and he's like, "That's 3." And Legolas is like, "I'm on 17 or something like that, And he's like, "What?"
Yeah, definitely the whole exchange between Legolas and Gimli is great throughout the whole series.
Yeah.
And the connection, but just between the three, that was the other thing, about the whole Lord of the Rings movies was the characters that they created. Or the actors that they got to play the characters. They didn't create the characters, obviously, but
they put their own spin on the characters.
And the just the chemistry that the actors have together and the way they play them just fits perfectly.
I actually just reminded myself of one of my favorite moments from this movie is when they're running. It's when Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn are chasing down the orcs trying to get to Merry and Pippin, and it just shows them constantly running. Gimli says something, he's like,
breathing.
We dwarves are natural sprinters. He's like, we don't do well with the cross country. He's like, but we're very dangerous in short distances.
Yeah.
There's just some good writing, good funny lines like that in the movie. It's pretty good.
Yeah. I was gonna see. Oh, speaking of Helm's Deep, there is actually a moment that I recorded because it stood out to me so much, and I don't think it was extended. It couldn't have been. But there's a moment where you have the dwarf toss.
Oh yeah. Where Aragorn tosses Gimli to the bridge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a joke, obviously a play off of the comment from the first movie where he says you never toss a dwarf.
Right.
And in this, he's like, "You gotta toss me," because he's like, "We can take on these guys," and it was funny.
And I like how he says, "Don't tell the elf."
Yeah. Because it's funny because they peek around and then it cuts to Gimli and he's looking at Aragorn with just this look of please. He goes, "We can take them." And then he says that, but you can see in his eyes, he's like, "We've got to do this." And Aragorn says, "It's a long way." And that's where he says, "You got to toss me." But that whole thing happens, and I can be okay with them fighting off these 20 ogres by themselves. But then there's a moment where Theoden says to them, he goes, Aragorn, Gimli, get out of there. And then like it's very strange because like an ogre or an orc jumps on Gimli and he's like struggling. He's like, oh, and he's like turning and everything. And then it cuts to Theoden and he's like looking through this hole in the doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And then he picks up a wood like panel.
Yeah.
And covers the hole he's looking through. So he's like basically abandoned them now. He's like, it's you have to watch it. It's a very strange moment.
I vaguely remember it. Yeah.
He puts it up, and then right after he does that, Legolas up on top of the wall goes, Aragorn. He's like, here's like he doesn't say this, but he's like, here's a rope, and he throws like the rope down, and then like Aragorn grabs Gimli.
Oh yeah, and they get
and he pulls him up. But it's such a weird scene how it happens. Like, they're fighting, and then all of a sudden, Theoden just goes and goes, hey, guys, you got to get out of there. And then Legolas
but not this
like,
way.
And then Legolas from all the way up the top immediately is like, here's a rope, and then throws it, and then they go, it's strange.
Oh, interesting.
It, like, stood out to me, and I recorded it. Yeah, if you go back and watch it and, like, are really looking at how just it's played out, it almost was like, it was just a very strange scene.
Another thing that I thought was strange was before the battle actually begins, Aragorn is sitting there, I think, and he looks over and he sees like a young man, and he calls his name out, so he knows who the kid is.
Oh yeah, he's like a teenage kid.
Yeah, Haleth or
no, he doesn't
something.
call out his name. He asks him
what his name is.
Yeah.
Anyway, the note I wrote was he calls out to him. And the kid turns around and he looks to me like he's 16, 17 years old or something. And he walks over and he asks, he might ask him what his name is. But when the kid talks, he's got like a 12-year-old's voice. Like his voice does not match his face, in my opinion, at all. It's like his face looks like he's gone through puberty and should have a deep voice or deeper voice. And when he talks, he's like, yes, sir. They're trying to make him seem younger than I think he actually was, to kind of show that it's like not just men fighting in this battle, it's also
I gotcha.
Inexperienced children.
No, well they you're right. They do go to not only that, but another time they kind of try to throw that in is there's like this boy that looks young and he's gone with the women and children down to the safe haven.
Yeah.
And then there's like a man that's like coming and he's kind of like taking a boy and he's like, you gotta, I think it's his dad.
He's gotta come fight. Yeah,
but he's like, you gotta come with me. And like the boy's like saying goodbye to his mom. So yeah, there were a couple times that they were kind of trying to, I think, point that out.
I just didn't think that maybe that actor actually sounded that way. I don't know, but I remember, because I haven't seen this movie in a while, when that guy turned around and then Aragorn asked him what his name is, and when he opened his mouth and started speaking, I was like, what? It was just didn't match in my opinion. But
gotcha.
My favorite, what used to be my favorite, I don't know if my favorite moment in Helm's Deep now is just the exchange between Legolas and Gimli, I think. But I remember seeing this movie in the theater and thinking that the part where Legolas throws down a shield and basically surfs down the stairs while shooting arrows, I remember thinking that was really cool back when I saw it in the theater. It's still cool, but it's not necessarily my favorite scene anymore.
To me, Helm's Deep watching it this time was almost like there's really good points and there's really bad points. It was strange. Like I was finding a lot of stuff in Helm's Deep where I was like,
good, yeah,
where I was like, this kind of taking it anyway. There was one of the things too was Theoden. He gets stabbed in the shoulder,
right?
And he's like, and I was like wondering, why is he up? Like, I know he's the king and he's supposed to be leading, but the positioning where they are right now, where he's literally they've broken a hole into the door and he's like up at the front stabbing the orcs with a long spear and then he gets stabbed back with one. But I was like, why is the king up at the
in the front lines.
using a spear to stab. Yeah, like front lines I can get if he's been trained heavily with a sword and he's doing one-on-one combat. But yeah, to be a spearman was kind of threw me.
Maybe they were showing that they were how few soldiers they had, that even the king had to be there.
Maybe,
stabbing orcs with a spear. I don't know.
There were a lot of people behind him.
They were like, he's got this. I think he's good.
But I think one of the things too they were really trying to drive is that the king was at the front and he's not back there like, you guys do the work and I'm going to watch. Like the king's there with them.
That was
which
probably
is cool.
I agree.
But I felt like that was a bad place to do it because him using a spear, I was like, I don't think they'd be making the king do that. That's really vulnerable.
The king of Gondor wouldn't have been in the front lines like that.
That's true. Is he even the king?
I assumed he was, but maybe not. He might just be. He is in Gondor. I know that.
Yeah, he's either the king. He might be the king. I'm obviously showing my fan wisdom here, but he's either the king or he's like a seat holder.
Yeah, he might. Yeah, he might be. I just know that he's
because technically Aragorn is the king of
right. Return of the King, right? So I don't know if he is. Maybe he calls himself the king. I don't know. I don't remember. I know what happens to him in Return of the King, but
it's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that whole thing.
I like the actor that plays him,
but we'll talk about that later.
Right? Yeah, we'll talk about that when we talk about Return of the King. That actor is John Noble, and I like him a lot. He's been on a few things.
He was so harsh on Faramir. Yeah. I was like, man, it's almost like pushing it too much because like Faramir's because Boromir's like, oh, Faramir's really the reason, and then he looks at Faramir and is like, you guys let them. You might as well have just backed off and said, come on in. Like I was like, wow, like
what a jerk. Yeah.
Anyway. I was like, anyway, go
ahead. I have one more note, and I honestly don't remember where it happens in the movie. I can see the scene in my mind, but I watched this movie a month ago, so I don't remember exactly where it happens. But I just wrote my last note is I like the orc carrying the torch and running in slow motion like an Olympian. So I guess I just enjoyed that moment.
It's a cool scene, yeah.
Cinematography.
Well, it's funny because they point out that they figure out that there's this vulnerable spot in the wall where there's a drain and it's not being held up, obviously, there. And they could put literally explosives there, which...
Oh, yeah. They kind of invent gunpowder in this movie. Yeah.
And I think it's Saruman that does it because Wormtongue's like, what could we possibly use? And like... And then he brings the fire close, and Saruman's like pushes the fire. He's like, not a good idea. Right. And then that whole scene too, where because that's right afterwards. Wormtongue kind of follows him. And he's like, there's no force on Earth like that. And then they walk out on the balcony there, and you just see the army of Isengard. Which it's also quite intimidating.
There's no way that whole... he is a wizard, so maybe he could do something with magic. But I remember
it's funny because this is going to transition into my next note. Go ahead.
Maybe your note is the same as mine. I remember thinking, there's no way that entire army could hear him talking from that balcony, right? Like, I was going to say, I feel like that happens a lot in... well, not a lot, but I feel like I've seen that in more than one movie where a character is addressing a crowd, and I remember, and there's no obvious, it's either an old movie or it's set in a different universe like this, where microphones and amplifiers don't exist, and I was like, there's no way that the people in the back.
Well, that's funny because I actually thought the same thing when Boromir was up at the top of the tower and he was addressing.
Right, yeah.
I was thinking the same thing.
People in the back are like, Yeah, I can't hear anything this guy's saying.
We're gonna cheer.
Right, yeah. Everybody else is
Gondor
cheering.
forever. Just say that.
Right. But then I thought, like, Boromir, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I don't think people in the back definitely can't hear Boromir. But I figured with Saruman, he's a wizard, so maybe he could do some sort of amplified voice magic thing.
I doubt that was what they were intending.
That's what I could tell myself, though, to make it kind of make sense.
That works.
Um,
My thing about Saruman and him being a wizard was the trees are coming. Because I love that moment too, where Treebeard's walking, and then he's like, and then he sees the
burned, yeah,
and that was the straw that broke the camel's back,
right,
and then all the trees start attacking, and I'm like, well, can't like Saruman just like create this big fire ring or something? But then they break the dam. So that wouldn't have obviously mattered anyway, because they were shooting fire arrows at them, and there were some of them getting caught on fire. But I was like, why wouldn't Saruman just like create this giant like fire spell? But also, then after that, I was like, wait a minute, why didn't Saruman think he knew about the Ents? I was like, why would he not be worried about And not only did he know about the Ents, but I would assume he'd know that the Ents like were right here.
Right.
So
like
was he not worried about them finding out and getting mad? Like, why is he surprised? And why didn't he prepare for this?
It's like when they're like, I could see like the orcs going to Saruman and be like, should we burn this forest down? And he's like, yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I don't see how that could be a bad idea.
Well, it's in this one, isn't it? I think he tells them it's either this one or Fellowship, but I think it's this one where they decide to burn down the trees. I think it's this one.
I don't remember, to be honest with you. It might be the beginning of this one or something. Yeah,
it's one of the two. But yeah, he makes the call. He says we need to burn the trees. I think it was for fire, for maybe to make the army.
Right.
Or making maybe the weapons and armor for anyway. It was something to do with fire. They needed wood for the fire and the forging.
I know at the end of this film, Gollum essentially kind of has a conversation with himself, which I really enjoyed. I remember seeing that in the theater and thinking that was a really cool way to do that, where it actually kind of has two different camera angles for each personality.
Yeah, and so here's the deal with that. Actually, that had been done just before this.
Oh, really?
Spider-Man 2. No, Spider-Man, the first
Oh,
one.
yeah, with Willem Dafoe and Green Goblin, his Green Goblin personality.
The first Spider-Man literally came out a few months before Two Towers.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the Gollum scene and thinking, oh, that's unfortunate, because I bet they had that idea before Spider-Man came out.
It's just coincidence, yeah.
And yeah. And I don't know, it technically they might have had enough time to add it in because it was like 6 months out, but
probably not. Especially because these movies were shot back to back to back.
And that's true. And regardless, well, they still could have added that, but
they could have. But I feel like it was
just Gollum. It was just.
It was probably just a crazy coincidence.
I think you're probably right, and regardless, it was well done on both. In both movies, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And I don't watch it now, and I think about Spider-Man, but only because I remember thinking about it then.
Right.
I don't know.
It didn't come to my brain when I was watching this movie this time. Anyway, so this movie ends with Gollum having kind of a conversation with himself and deciding that he's going to take Frodo and Sam to the spider because he thinks you said the name of it. I forget the name.
Shelob.
Yeah.
Shelob.
He's going to take that to Shelob or Shelob. And because he thinks the spider will probably kill them and he'll be able to get the precious back. So that's where the movie ends. It kind of ends on that little, if you call it a cliffhanger, that little bit of a cliffhanger. So yeah, I guess that's, I'm sure there's tons of stuff we could still talk about with this movie because it is a long movie. But I think this episode's pretty long as it is, so I think we should go right into our rating.
Yeah.
What do you give the Two Towers?
I will give the Two Towers. I'm going to give it an extra half star just because I was thinking about this while I was watching the movie, and I was like, I think sometimes there are times where my rating is affected by how iconic a movie is.
Right.
And I would say that is going to impact my rating to a degree on this. And I'm going to give it. No, I'm gonna give it 4.5, or excuse me, 4 out of 5 stars.
4 out of 5. Okay. I'm going to give it 4.5. I'm tempted to give it 5.
I was thinking about giving it 4.5, but I'm going to stick with 4.
This is you know me. My attention span is not very good, and usually when I sit down to watch a movie at home, unless I just like tell myself I'm not allowed to get up and watch or pause it for whatever reason, I sometimes take forever to get through a movie because I'll pause it for this reason or that reason. But this movie I actually watched on my iPad, and because I think my wife was watching something else on the TV, and I just sat on the couch and watched this on my iPad with her, or with in the same room as her, and I managed to watch all 4 hours of it in one sitting, which I think is saying something. Which means I enjoyed this movie a lot this time around, and
and it's interesting you say that because I will say I remember watching this and just seeing how far I had gotten. Like I paused it, and I remember I was like, I think an hour and a half into the movie, and I was like, there's no way. I was like, usually if I'm an hour and a half to the movie, I feel like it's like should be ending.
right.
And I was like, I do not feel like I've been watching this for an hour and a half. So yeah, when you watch this movie, it just flows really well.
Yeah, it's paced very well. It
doesn't feel like it's taking.
Right.
And it's weird too because you have those moments, and you hear people talk about how the Lord of the Rings movies are just people walking.
right.
But it just moves well.
Yeah. So that's part of the reason why I'm tempted to give it 5 stars, but I think I'll stick with 4.5. So that's I'd give it 4.5 stars. It's really a good movie.
It is, and I, like I said, part of me wants to say 4.5, even now, but
say
it. It's really good.
No, you can stick with your 4 stars. I'm not going to pressure you into.
Well, I mean, I'll fight you, man. No, I think I'm going to stick with 4. It's fantastic movie. Though.
Yeah,
really good.
Well, we'd love to know what you think about The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. You can always send us a comment on cinemaheroes.com. You can comment on Facebook, facebook.com/SM and SM Podcasts. You can tweet us on Twitter @CinemaHeroes. Also on Instagram, same handle. Or you can leave a comment on this video on YouTube if you're watching it. We'd love to hear from you any which way you want to reach out to us. I think that about wraps it up for this episode, though. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pilza.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.